protecting Main Street from Wall Street. It's time for Money Unleashed with Eric Johnson and Kyle Allyn.
You have to have a plan where you know if the market's going to go up, what happens next. And you also have to have a plan where if it doesn't go the way you think, you know what you're going to do.
It's time to put you back in control of your money.
I'm not trying to predict the weather, which is kind of what we're talking about, right? It's predicting the stock market. I'm trying to build a better boat.
This is Money Unleashed with Eric Johnson and Kyle Allyn.
Welcome to Money Unleashed with Eric Johnson and Kyle Allyn. We are powered by the Hoffman Financial Group, and each and every week we're bringing you new episodes. So make sure you're subscribed wherever you get your podcasts. Just search for Money Unleashed. Now, everybody out there, we're constantly giving people tips on how to invest properly and do the right things to grow their portfolios. But now we're going to give you a lesson on how not to invest, right? So, Kyle, you came up with a great article from Barry Ritholtz, and he's the CEO of Ritholtz Wealth Management up in Manhattan, right? And Josh Brown's up there as well, too. You and I both like listening to him. And he always comes out with a book every now and again, and he talks about investing. But he likes to start off with what not to do. And there's a couple different ideas to this. Let's hop into this, Kyle.
Yeah, so it's an interesting concept. He talked about how there's all kinds of books on telling you what to do. And often clients are coming into the office and saying, well, should I do this or should I do that? Well, what about what you shouldn't do?
Right.
So you can't always control the future, but there are a lot of things that are just known and we walk past them. So there's a lot of little things that a financial advisor can bring to you that just keep you out of trouble. One of the things he talks about was looking into bad ideas. He talks about how Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett were asked if they were smarter than others, and that's why they had been successful.
Right.
And the answer from Charlie Munger was he was less stupid.
You know what? I love Charlie Munger and I love Warren Buffett. These guys are so practical, right?
Yeah.
They got a certain pragmatism about them, and they're so real about it. Yeah, being less stupid.
So let's talk about that for a second, right? Without being offensive, without being harsh, let's talk about some of the mistakes that people make, some of the things that would allow us to be less stupid.
Yeah, okay.
One of those that I would say that we see often with clients is just not having the understanding of the market.
Yeah.
So we talk about this in my office a lot. If you got in a swimming pool and you looked at everyone else and said, man, I am soaking wet and I can't figure out where this water came from. I got water all over me. I'm so wet.
While you're in the pool.
Well, you got in a swimming pool, right? So when you think about that in relation to the stock market, it's very similar to the way clients are talking to us. They are buying equities. They're in the stock market. And then they look at us and go, man, there's so much volatility.
Right.
It's like, okay, well, you got in the stock market. The stock market is volatile. Now, the question is, and this is where I show some empathy, how much? And so this is what an advisor can help you work on. If you're looking at the stock market has a 14% average drawdown on an annual basis, and it has a 95% chance of a 10% drawdown each year.
Yeah.
So if you see the market go down 10%, you really shouldn't freak out that much.
Yeah, and that reminds me of something else Warren Buffett says all the time. He goes, if you're not ready, prepared to be down 30% in any given moment, you should not be in the stock market. So it's like, yes, you're going to get in the swimming pool, you're going to get wet. But people need to understand that there's nothing linear about this world. Like, you just don't buy a stock and it goes straight up. It's not how the game works, right?
And I think this is imperative to talk about because if you really were to boil down what a fiduciary is doing, right? So fiduciary, Latin for trust, it means that the person you're working with is acting in your interest.
Yes.
That's a really tricky one to think about. I joke sometimes that being a fiduciary is the right to be offensive, right?
Yeah.
All right. I've got a 3-year-old. Sometimes he goes, Daddy, I want to eat some chocolates. Well, it's 7:30 in the morning, buddy. We're not going to eat chocolates before breakfast.
Right.
Right? So that hurts his feelings. He wants to eat chocolate at 7:30. We're not going to eat the chocolate at 7:30. He can have that after lunch.
I've had this conversation many times with my little girls, by the way.
Right? So this is what it's like to work with a fiduciary because you come in their office and you say, well, I want to do X, Y, Z. I just had this conversation with a couple. They were in their 80s, I think mid-80s if I remember correctly, and she was looking at investing about $1 million. He was like, hey, if you do a good job with hers, I'll let you look at mine. I'm like, yes, sir. So then we get to looking at the portfolio, and they had been pushed into a place where they were extremely conservative. Mm-hmm. And I mean extremely conservative. So I said, all right, who here is the one that's worried about the volatility of the market? And he raised his hand. He said, it's me. I just don't want to lose money. And she goes, not me. I'm very comfortable with the market. I go, okay, that's interesting.
Right.
Because your portfolio is what we're looking at, and your portfolio has basically been pulled all the way out of the stock market.
Right.
So then we got to talking. We did a couple meetings there together, and I said, guys, I want to stop you for a second. At your age, I would argue a vast majority of this money is actually being built for the next generation. And they said, absolutely. We would argue all of it.
Yeah.
Okay, if all of the money is being built for your 50-year-old son, and you're 85 years old, then you're in a scenario that money has a longer time horizon than you do.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So if you start thinking about this idea, you see that there's a compound effect and there's a power here. And so one of the things in the book that Barry wrote about was this idea of compounding. So he said, okay, we've heard that the dollar loses value over time.
Okay.
There's two soldiers, and in 1917, they each have $1,000, right? They're marching off the war, they got $1,000. One guy buries $1,000 in the backyard. The other gentleman says, I'm going to just put it in the U.S. stock market, the S&P 500. The guy, of course, that buried in the backyard, it's his grandkids that are pulling it up. It's still $1,000. Not a lot of power there.
Right.
On the flip side, the people that would have pulled up the $1,000 that would have been in the S&P 500 would be $32 million today.
How about that?
$32 million. So I was looking at this client. I go, if someone buries your money into the backyard, the amount of loss, opportunity-wise, that exists in your family is unfathomable.
Is drastically more than the 5 or 10%
Absolutely
that you're going to get. Yeah.
So one of the biggest issues that I see is people are being too conservative. They're being convinced because they're 80, because they're 75, that they're scared of the market, they're nervous of the process, and they should get out of growth. And I'm here to say that is a massive fallacy, because there's an opportunity, maybe not with every dollar you have, but there's an opportunity if you're working with a fiduciary to sit down and get comfortable with some of this money being in the stock market. And as we just said here, very small pieces invested over long periods of time with high compounding effect can be millions and millions in gains.
Yeah, the powers of compounding interest is what you really want to harness when you're growing a portfolio. And I like what you just said. Typically for retirees and people getting closer to retirement, when you do convert over to an income plan, because that's how you beat the time enemy in retirement, you do want to have some money off to the side that is in the market, that is allowed to go up and down with the fluctuations, right? Because if you don't need to actually touch it, now you bought yourself time to keep investing like you're in your 40s again, which is super important because you do want to grow your portfolio in retirement as well. And I love your example about the retiree, it's being a little too conservative, but saying that they don't mind being in the market. So here's one bit that I would like to point out how not to invest is don't let the short term deter you from the long-term goal, right? And I know it gets harder for people who are getting close to retirement or just recently retired. However, you have to be a historian, right? You really have to be a historian with your portfolio. Like, what has it done over the past few years? How did it react from 2020 until today? Are you up? How much are you up in the grand scheme of things? And don't let a short-term pullback deter you from determining if your portfolio is successful or not. I've been seeing a lot of that recently where people have forgotten that they've been beating the S&P 500 for the past few years. They're, actually 20 to even 30% above that because they've been aggressive and they've been rewarded for that. But, when you live by the sword, you also die by the sword. And when you see a little 5 to 10% pullback, you can't be like everything is screwed up, right? This is just part of the portfolio. So I see a lot of that. They let the short-term fluctuations deter what their long-term goals are. And then what it leads to is knee-jerk reactions. And that is not a good way to be making decisions in retirement. Knee-jerk reactions will get you out of the market. They'll get you out from any sort of bounce backs that you're able to have. 9 times out of 10, you're in a lot of good positions that have gotten you to be beating the benchmarks that we've set up for people. And typically what happens is if you want to get all out of that, because you've seen it go down because you can't watch the short-term dollar signs any longer, then you're basically ensuring that you're not going to receive it back when it comes back up again, and that's what we've witnessed this week. That's another way that you can not properly invest, right, is just getting too emotional, making knee-jerk reactions, and basically getting yourself out of the game altogether because you can't time the market, you need time in it, and the best way to make money inside the market is not to get scared out of it. Right? So if you've determined like, hey, I'm in an 80-20 or 70-30 portfolio, and for the last 2 years you've been enjoying, a nice run-up, when you hop on a roller coaster, there are going to be downs. I mean, it'd be a really boring roller coaster if it just went straight up, right? But that's not how the game works. And so I would implore people out there that if you're reacting too much to short little pullback, then maybe you shouldn't be so aggressive. But sometimes people need that because they haven't saved properly because they're too conservative.
Yeah, one of the things I talk about with clients a lot of times is the idea of the cowboy account.
Yeah.
Or we call this the play account.
Yeah, the play account. You're allowed to have one of these.
You're allowed to have one of these. So I would think if you're the kind of person who says, I want to buy some of these really volatile positions, and you're also the type of person who freaks out, then just use them in your play account. Let's say you have $1 million. Okay, well, you've got 20 or 30 or 50 grand on the side in your cowboy account, and that cowboy account's riding that buck and bronco. It's all over the place.
You're in Bitcoin.
You know where to put that energy, right? So it makes me think of working with my 3-year-old. There are certain rooms in the house where he's allowed to make just the biggest mess ever, and there's certain rooms in the house I'm like, hey, we're not going to do that, right? So if you come into my house, you'll see it's generally very, very clean, kind of a clean guy. And so my son knows, all right, if we're on this floor, we got to keep it down.
Right.
But we're on this floor, man, you could just pull the toys out, throw them everywhere, and have a blast, right? So you need that type of account if you're that kind of person. So do you have a cowboy account or not? If you don't have a cowboy account, it may be useful to do that. And then I would argue that's an account that you have on the side. So one of the things we talk about often, because people will hear us talking about the idea of managing their assets, managing their money, and they're thinking, well, I don't know if I want to give you all of my money.
Right.
It's very common for clients to give us a piece of the portfolio. We're looking for the opportunity to earn your business, to have you as a client. And a lot of times clients will say, well, can I give you a piece of this so that we can test it first, you can do a good job, and then we'll look at the rest later?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely you can.
There are some firms out there that will talk about, hey, you got to give me every dollar to hire me. That's not the Hoffman Group.
No.
We're willing to build with you. We're willing to help with you. And there are different types of accounts that allow those allocations to be in the appropriate places. That way, when you go through the market, they're in the appropriate results.
Yeah, in the advisory world, it's for everybody out there, it's truly not a zero-sum game, right? You're going to have some people say, give me all your money, you're going to die. It's not how this game works, right? So one of the first questions I ask when I'm sitting down with a couple or an individual is, hey, do you have a zeal for this? Have you been doing this on your own? Like, it's not our job to take the baby away from you. And I say, hey, would you like to have a play account? It's okay to have one of those. And I don't mind having a race. Like we can have competition. That's what this whole thing's about, right? Is competing and doing better and benchmarking yourselves and seeing how you're doing. So if you would like to have one of these accounts, it's appropriate, and you can throw it all into one or two stocks and see how it does. Meanwhile, you have the rest of your portfolio chopping wood, making reasonable gains. You want to have better protections, income plans, and also maybe an actively managed growth plan incorporated in there too. And now you have the best of both worlds. You've got a go-forward account, so you could scratch that itch. But you also have an account that's going to get you across the finish line, if you will. And that's super important when you have a full-fledged plan put together. We believe everybody needs one of these, Kyle. Why don't you touch on what a full-fledged plan looks like at Hoffman Financial Group? So,
of course, we're going to start with income. In real estate, it's location, location, location. In retirement planning, it's income. Then we're going to look at protection, growth. Of course, we're going to round the basis with taxes, and we're going to finish it out with a legacy plan. So we are going to help you build that full plan. If you've been working with an advisor that was only focusing on the market and not the plan, that's not us.
That's a fantastic way to describe that, Kyle. And everybody out there, you need one of these. We can't stress how important it is to have one of these ready for your portfolio so you can have a successful retirement. Give us a call. We're happy to help you. 404-640-5511. That's 404-640-5511. Or you can find us online at unleashyourmoney.com.
Eric Johnson and Kyle Allyn are investment advisor representatives of Brookstone Wealth Advisors, LLC, a registered investment advisor and affiliate of Brookstone Capital Management, LLC. BWA and Hoffman Financial Group are affiliated under common ownership. Registered investment advisors and investment advisor representatives act as fiduciaries for all of our investment management clients. We have an obligation to act in the best interest of our clients and to make full disclosures of any conflicts of interest. Please refer to our firm brochure, the ADV 2A, page 4, for additional information. The Hoffman Financial Group and WSB are not affiliated. Exposure to ideas and financial vehicles discussed should not be considered investment advice or recommendation to buy or sell any financial vehicle. This information should not be considered tax or legal advice. Individuals should consult with a professional specializing in the field of tax, legal, accounting, or investments regarding the applicability of this information for their situation. Any client experiences discussed during the show are unique to that client. They are not meant to imply or suggest you will experience the same results. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. Investments will fluctuate and when redeemed may be worth more or less than when originally invested. Any comments regarding safe and secure products and guaranteed income streams refer only to fixed insurance products. They do not refer in any way to securities or investment advisory products. Fixed insurance and annuity product guarantees are subject to the claims paying ability of the issuing company and are not offered by Brookstone. Index or fixed annuities are not designed for short-term investments and may be subject to caps, restrictions, fees, and surrender charges as described in the annuity contract. Please refer to our firm brochure, the ADV 2A, item 4, for additional information. Hoffman Financial Group is not affiliated with or endorsed by the Social Security Administration or any other government agency. Insurance licensed in Georgia, number 163546.